The Mafia's Good Girl, Chapter 15. Violet's Point of View. Violet let out a sigh as she stared at her reflection in the mirror. This morning, she attempted a fake escape from the estate and got Damon to come back. She thought she'd be able to handle him, but he ended up overpowering her in more ways than one. Violet's little plan backfired, and now she ended up with bruises all over her body. She was watching her reflection, and her face looked weak and hopeless. Violet was losing hope that she would get out of here soon, or at all at this point. What if he ends up keeping me here forever? Violet didn't leave her room at all today. After Elena found her tied up and naked in bed, she quickly went over to set her free, but she couldn't do anything more than that. Elena put a tray of food on her desk, gave her a sad smile, and exited the room. Violet figured that this kind of thing must be a common occurrence in this place. Everyone here was scared to talk about Damon, and they all only existed to serve him, including Violet. The sound of her phone ringing pierced through the air, and it pulled Violet out of her daydreaming. She went over to the bedside table and grabbed her phone. It was a call from Dylan. She let out a sigh before picking up the call. "Hey Dill, V, what's the deal? What's going on?" Dylan sounded worried like always. "Are you coming back today?" "No, I don't think I can leave today," Violet said as she looked down. "This is bullshit. He's keeping you there for no reason." Dylan cussed. "Are you okay, V? Should we call the police or something?" Violet thought about the idea for a moment. Then she remembered Jesse Miller, her old sweet neighbor turned cop, who was a wonderful human being, and she forgot about his date invitation completely. "No, I don't think we should get the cops involved." Violet shook her head. "These people aren't gonna take that lightly, so what are you gonna do? Just stay there? I guess." "For how long?" "For as long as it takes." "Violet," Dylan protested. "I'm fine, Dial. Everyone's treating me well here. I even made a friend." Violet forced out a smile. She was on the verge of crying, but Dylan couldn't see that. She only said these things so her brother wouldn't worry. "V, are you sure you're okay?" Dylan said after a while of silence. "I'm positive," she lied again. That afternoon, Violet spent her day locked up inside her bedroom. After talking to Dylan on the phone, she took a long hot bath, and she just sat by the window watching the garden. She thought about going out to see Talia, but after everything that happened, the past 24 hours, Violet didn't have the energy to communicate with anyone else. She just wanted to be left alone. It was a simple wish, wanting to be left alone, and Violet almost got it. No one bothered her except for Elena delivering her lunch and dinner, both things she didn't touch. Violet continued to stay in her seat by the window until the night time, and it was time for bed. It was around 10 p.m. when Violet got up to her feet and drifted to the bed. She lay on that bed and closed her eyes for about 5 minutes before she heard a noise. Her eyes jerked open instinctively. Violet had her back to the door, but she could hear the sound of the door creaking open. Violet didn't turn around or move an inch. She knew it wouldn't be Elena, because she'd knock first. There could only be one other person who'd come to find her in her room, and it was the one person Violet didn't want to see. "You didn't eat your food," Violet heard Damon's low and husky voice, but she didn't feel like responding. She was going to pretend like she was asleep, but Damon suddenly stepped into her periphery. "Why not?" he asked again. He was standing right in front of her, in his signature black suit and white shirt. "I'm not hungry," Violet replied, and turned to her side, avoiding any eye contact with Damon. Violet heard him sigh and felt the bed behind her dipped. He sat down next to her, and Violet instinctively scooted away. "You have to eat something," he said. "Or what?" she replied challengingly. "I'll just die here anyway." There was a lot of bottled-up resentment and bitterness on Violet's part. But can you blame her? Damon let out another sigh, and then he said, "You really want to get out of here?" Violet turned her head back and narrowed her eyes at him. Is that even a question?" she said. Their eyes met for the first time, and Damon let out a smirk. "Fine. Tell you what, I'll make you a deal," he said. "Another deal?" Violet wanted to roll her eyes. The last time she made a deal with the devil, she ended up getting screwed over. She wasn't going to fall to the same scheme again twice. Since Violet wasn't answering, Damon proceeded to take off his suit jacket, and he started undoing his tie. Every time he started undressing, something bad always happened to Violet. She started panicking, and she was in survival mode again. "What are you doing?" she stammered. Damon's suit and tie were now on the floor. Then he started unbuttoning his shirt, and Violet caught the sight of his toned and rock-hard body. "The rule is simple. I'm going to kiss you, and if you don't come, I'll take your virginity, and you can leave here before sunrise," Damon said as he slipped the shirt off his body. The shirt went flying to the floor, and Violet swallowed hard. Damon then leaned closer until his face was only inches away from her. "But if you come, I'm going to have to punish you." Violet thought about what Damon just said. She never planned on coming regardless of what he was doing. If she could really hold it together, would he really let her go tonight? "Is this a trick? Do we have a deal?" Damon said with his head leaned to the side. "Deal," Violet said lowly. "Good girl," he replied. Damon pulled Violet by her waist until she lay flat on her back and underneath him. He stared at her for a moment, and Violet was nervous and stiff. His eyes darted to her lips, and she saw his Adam's apple moving. Damon started leaning down, and Violet thought he was going to kiss her lips, but no. His lips delved straight for her neck, kissing and sucking hard against her skin. Violet lay completely still as Damon pinned both her hands down on the bed. He was kissing her with such force and power, Violet couldn't help but squirm a little. For some reason, the knots in her stomach were back, and they were more intense than ever. Violet let out a gasp, while Damon is doing everything to let her lose in their deal. She tried her best to control herself, but somehow, she ended up moving and molding her body towards him. Damon let out an appreciative groan, and he started trailing kisses down her body. Violet started breathing hard, and she struggled to keep herself still. She had never felt anything like this before. Violet scrunched her eyes shut, as everything inside her was aching for a release. The intense feeling in her stomach grew wilder and wilder until suddenly, Violet let out a scream, and her entire body convulsed in shock. Jolts of electricity ran through her veins, and her eyes rolled to the back of her head. Suddenly her body felt light, and it was like she was floating on a bed of clouds. "What on earth is happening to me?" Damon's point of view. Violet screamed, and Damon felt her body jerking aggressively. She even squirted a little, and Damon pulled away to look up at her. Her nails were digging into the sheets, and her mouth fell open. It was unmistakable. The little girl came unraveling in a wild wave of orgasm. Damon let out a smirk and licked his lips. "You came," he commented. Violet's breaths were ragged, and she forced herself to open her eyes. She looked confused and baffled, and her cheeks were blushing bright pink. "I didn't mean to." She shook her head and pleaded with him. Damon let out a chuckle and rolled himself off the bed. Secretly, he was rooting for her not to come so he could take her tonight. He had been dying to take her ever since he first saw her. But keeping her around and playing with her like this was just as fun. "Please," Violet said again. She stared at him with pleading eyes, and Damon only smiled from ear to ear. "You know the rules, baby girl. You know what this means, right?" Violet swallowed hard. Even if she didn't want to admit it, she knew it was time for her punishment. Damon picked up his tie from the floor, and he stepped closer to Violet. She tried backing away as far as she could, but Damon pulled her to him in one strong grip. "What are you gonna do to me?" She quivered. "You need to learn how to control yourself," he said simply. Damon then put the tie over her head and covered her eyes with them. Violet wanted to protest, but Damon's hands were firm around her head. "Don't fight, or it's going to be more painful," he warned. Violet obeyed and stayed completely still. Once he finished putting the blindfolds on, Damon pulled her little body off the bed. He picked her entire body up with ease and threw her over his shoulder. Violet let out a gasp, but she knew better than to fight it. Damon then took her out of the room and walked towards his office. He went straight for the bookshelves behind the desk and pressed a button on the back. The shelf creaked open, revealing a hidden door. The door had a fingerprint lock, and after Damon pressed his thumb against it, the door opened. The lights turned on, immediately revealing a large dark room with a king-sized bed in the middle. There were all sorts of contraptions, machines and toys all around the room. Everything a sex dungeon would ever need. Damon closed the door behind him and stood Violet down on the floor. He was working to untie her blindfolds when she asked, "Where are we?" Damon didn't answer her right away. He figured the place would speak for itself. He took off the blindfolds, and Violet's eyes widened instantly. She took note of the big bed in the middle of the room. She took note of all the ropes and hooks hanging from the ceiling. There were chains and wooden beams, and something that looked like a massage table. Violet's mouth fell open in shock. Damon let out a chuckle as he recognized the look on her face very well. It was the look of someone knowing that they were doomed. "Welcome to my world," he said.